Jaylen Brown with the flush. Tatum the drive. Tatum the finish.
It is Banner 18. The mission commanded is mission accomplished.
What's up, everyone? This is Noa Dalzell, and I'm here with a post-game version of You Got Boston, here to recap the Celtics' 118-114 loss to the Philadelphia 76ers. Still here at TD Garden, where the Celtics just lost. I don't want to say one of their worst games of the season, because there have certainly been worse losses, but it was their fourth loss in 7 consecutive games, 3 of 4, and I think this was the first one where you could kind of feel the players, Joe Mazzulla, talking about how the effort is not maybe where it exactly needs to be. The consistency is not quite where it needs to be. Defensively, there's a certain level of ownership that's not there. And so far with these losses, we really haven't seen it go in that direction. We haven't seen anybody be super outspoken, and they weren't super outspoken, but I think there was a sense of honesty about the fact that this is not a stretch of great basketball for the Celtics. So I'm going to keep these episodes short, probably just 20-minute reactions, and just talk about kind of the good things and the bad things that we saw in this game, and then just any takeaways from the post-game press conferences. So you can find these podcasts on my YouTube channel, You Got Boston, or also on CLNS Media. And normally I'll be doing these from home, but they still have the court assembled today in TD Garden, so figured I'd just stay here and do the reaction show from here. So I'll start with the good things, because today they were more bad than good, which has not been the case covering this team over the last year and a half. I think the one positive is Jayson Tatum has been playing really at a high level of basketball. Tonight he finished with 32 points and 11 of 20 shooting. He shot 4 of 8 from 3. He's finding some consistency from beyond the arc, which is great to see. 15 rebounds, that's back-to-back games for him where he's had 15 rebounds. And overall, I think that just offensively, he's finding his rhythm. He's not forcing things. In fact, I would have probably liked to see him shoot more than he did in this game. Just because I think at certain points he kind of had the hot hand, and the team, I don't want to say went away from him. But he wasn't able to kind of consistently find a good rhythm there. And I don't usually feel that. I feel like usually he's able to kind of continue asserting himself if he has it. So Tatum's play, just in general, during this recent stretch has been a bright spot in what it has otherwise been a pretty disappointing couple weeks of basketball on both ends for the Celtics. I'll also just shout out Al Horford, who was a plus 22 in 33 minutes. It's pretty remarkable that at his age, he's still able to give the Celtics such high-quality minutes. They were outscored by 26 in the 15 minutes that he didn't play. And so that's substantial. Embiid was a minus 18 in this game, even though Joel Embiid, I thought, was pretty strong in general, considering the fact he's missed so much time. That was the result. So Joel Embiid finished with 27 points on 8 of 15 shooting, and ultimately, that stuck out to me as is actually something you'd live with, just considering how effective Al was on that end. So I think you're looking at a Celtics team that has a couple of guys that have been individually struggling. Drew Holiday didn't play in this game. Kristaps Porzingis played in the first half, and then tweaked his ankle 90 seconds into this one, and then just didn't come back at all. And I think at halftime he probably got evaluated, and that's Joe said he didn't have much of an update, but Porzingis was questionable to return with an ankle, or doubtful to return, I should say, was the official injury update, with an ankle injury, and never came back into this game. And that's just another game now that's kind of been piling up, where he's just not able to finish these games out. He has played consistent minutes and, has come back from this initial left leg injury, but he hasn't been able to string together, 4 or 5 games where he's just healthy. And so that has stood out, and that's why Al was so important in this one, but ultimately it wasn't enough, despite I think Luke Cornett gave good minutes. Nemias Queta was fine in his minutes as well. So it wasn't really any of those guys' fault, but you kind of need him in these kinds of matchups, especially with Drew out and guys just not playing at the level that we're used to them playing. Technically, I'm supposed to still be on the good section, but I think the one other thing I was going to mention was Derrick White has really struggled with his shot of late, and he was able to find a rhythm tonight, shot 5 of 10 from beyond the arc. And just in general, I think these last few games, he's been finding more of a groove offensively. He finishes with 21 in this one. So that's the things that I think that stuck out. I mean, you have to also like the response, but ultimately this team fell behind by as many as 16. You saw them tie things up going into the fourth quarter. And then the 76ers began that period on an 18-2 run. And that's really unusual to see the Celtics in those big moments on a national TV game on Christmas in front of a really riled up fan base, to see them come out so flat. And it was all done when Embiid was off the floor. The Celtics, kind of were taken advantage of by the 76ers bench players. Caleb Martin, stop me if you've heard this before, but he finishes with 23 points on 8 of 11 shooting in this one, shot 7 of 9 from 3, and he's been really struggling with his shots, so that certainly stood out. Tyrese Maxey was sensational in this game. He scored 33 points on 12 of 13 shooting. They really didn't have an answer for him, and he kind of burned them with a minute to go. With 1 second on the shot clock, Tyrese Maxey was able to shake both Derrick White and Pritchard for a wide open layup. And so that was certainly one of those defensive breakdowns that we're quite familiar with at this point, that we've seen quite a few of throughout these last few games. To me, I think the Celtics defense was the worst that it's been in quite some time. They broke a bunch of records. They actually didn't have any steals until the final 3 minutes. No steals in the first half was the first time they've done that since the 90s, which that was pretty remarkable to watch. And honestly, it matches the eye test. Sometimes, the defensive stats don't always back up what you feel like you're seeing on the floor. And in this game, I felt like the just energy wasn't there. And it was kind of hard to believe, because I think with a team like this, in a game like this, you would think that they would just come out ready to play just because of the you're playing on Christmas. You're playing against a team that maybe has been struggling, but is all healthy and is a conference rival and has been for many years now. And the guy that honestly stood out to me was Jaylen Brown, who I've given him, I've been so impressed by his performances over the last year and a half on that end, on the defensive end. And he seemed really disengaged in the first half, both offensively and defensively. And he came alive in the third quarter, scored 14 in that period. But you really, you saw down the stretch when they needed to come back from that fourth quarter deficit, all of a sudden, there was just another gear that they stepped into. And Jaylen was a big part of that. Peyton Pritchard was a big part of that. Everybody really was. But it took until their backs were really against the wall to see that defensive effort that I think at points last year were what this team was really used to, and what kind of we became used to watching as the media. So, I think the defense is what I'll be watching. Obviously, offensively, this is not the same team that we saw last year. They were the second best three-point shooting team last season, and this season they're 16th in the NBA. And so that's a substantial difference. This is just three-point percentage. And Joe Mazzulla was asked about that pregame, and he didn't read. He said he's not going to kind of read too much into it, and that it's not a huge sample, and that he's comfortable with the guys taking the shots. But I think, the offensive thing you can live with. The defensive slip, I think, is where it's a little bit harder to understand it, because it's less variable. You should be able to control, your defensive intensity and effort and connectivity. And yes, they were without Drew Holiday today, and obviously he's important to what they do on that end. And Porzingis didn't play that second half, but they still have enough from a personnel standpoint, in my opinion, to play consistent basketball on that end always. And it's a long season. You're not going to see that effort every single night. But I think we've just reached the point where I'm willing to say it's like a little bit more than just a bad week. And I actually asked Tatum if he felt like it's just a bad week of work, or if it's just one of those kind of things that just you chalk it up to an 82 game season. And he didn't really, that wasn't actually his answer. I thought he might say like, yeah, it's just a bad week of work. It was a little bit of a cop out. And he said that last year during a stretch of games that culminated in that bad Lakers loss where they got blown out by no LeBron James, no Anthony Davis Lakers. But he said, we just got to man up and look in the mirror and figure out some things that we got to do better at. Everybody's fully capable. We've always done a really good job of responding. And so there's no panic, but I think that they are acknowledging the fact that there are some habits and things that they have to address. And it's the first time that we're hearing that language come out of their locker room. And I think it's a good thing, because, we've noticed it for a couple of games now, but the fact that they're willing to call it out is, and not in any, nobody's getting their fingers pointed at anybody, but I think that it stands out as like maybe a turning point here. And maybe it won't be. They have a couple, home games coming up here, and I think it's an opportunity for them to string together some wins before they go out west for a really difficult road trip. So we'll see, but I actually thought that the fact that they were able to, express the fact that this is not the level of consistency and intensity defensively that they're used to, it stood out as generally a positive thing to me. PrizePicks is the best place to get real money sports action. With over 10 million members and billions of dollars in awarded winnings, PrizePicks has made daily fantasy sports accessible to all. You just pick more or less on at least 2 players for a shot to win up to 1,000 times your cash. Run your game all season long on PrizePicks, America's #1 daily fantasy sports app. You can pick anything that you think is likely to happen. So I would pick Peyton Pritchard, certain number of threes, whatever it is, pretty safe, assurance at this point that he is going to hit that. Anything that you feel has been a pretty consistent pattern, those are the types of trends that you can capitalize on PrizePicks. You can make your holidays bigger and brighter with PrizePicks, the best place to get real money action while watching your favorite sports. Join now because this holiday season, PrizePicks is giving away 2 free picks in December, and they're giving away $30+ million in rewards during Picksmas. Download the app today and use code CLNS to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. Download the app today and use code CLNS to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. PrizePicks, run your game. So I think we're looking at a stretch of games here where they host the Pacers on Friday and on Sunday. And there's a team that's given them some challenges over the past few seasons. And we talk about it all the time that it almost doesn't need to be said, but that sweep in the conference finals was the most competitive series that they actually had. And this is a team that's been trending upwards. They had a really rough start to the season, Tyrese Halliburton and the rest of the group, but they've been a lot better of late. And so just thinking about this as in a kind of a big picture way, I think this Celtics team has an opportunity to string together a couple of wins. And then on Tuesday, they host the Raptors on New Year's Eve. And so all 3 of those games, you could easily kind of start a win streak here before you go out west, where you're facing a really difficult slate with the Rockets, the Thunder, the Nuggets. I'll be out west kind of covering those games on the ground. And so I think the big question that everybody has watching this team is is this just what happens when you win a championship and then you play in through June, and then some of you go to the Olympics and play there, and you have a short off season, and you feel a certain level of confidence that's maybe a little bit unshakable. Is this just what happens? Or is this the sign this just isn't the same team as last year, and the end result won't be the same? And so where I land on this ultimately is that it is the same team, and I don't think anything substantial has changed, and they've dealt with a little bit of injuries, but nothing significantly worse than what you would expect or worse than other teams have dealt with. But you have to replicate that same level of hunger and desperation that you had last season. And I think that part of what made that group really special last year is that they were coming off of a terrible, terrible exit that we know motivated Jaylen Brown, and we know it motivated everybody on the roster, that they lost in 7 games, were humiliated on their home floor, eliminated to Miami, and again, short of their first championship as a core. And that motivated them, and that they were hungry almost every night last season. Maybe a handful of games where they came out flat, but for the most part, you were watching a really desperate team, and it played into the playoffs. And then you saw them become a really confident team too. But I think the desperation almost happened first. Right now, they're a confident team, but I don't know that they're as desperate, and that can change really quickly. But you don't want to say, let's just coast through the regular season and then in April we'll turn it on, because we've seen historically that's just not how it works. These habits take time to build, and bad habits over time result in bad habits in the playoffs, and they result in teams not winning the championship. And so right now it's December. They still have a pretty good record. A good record. They're 22-8. They're the 3rd seed and the 2nd seed in the East, 3rd best record overall. But you go out west and you split those games, and now we're having a little bit of a different conversation. So I feel very optimistic about the season's forecast and kind of where things are headed, especially given the fact that this group has such a body of work associated with it. Ultimately, guys like Jayson Tatum and Jaylen Brown, there's no reason why I wouldn't believe that they can turn it up, because we've seen it happen so many times. My big concern, honestly, with this group right now is Kristaps Porzingis' health moving forward, and not the ankle tweak from this game, because I don't have any reason to believe this is a serious injury. But the fact that it seems like he just can't play 5 games in a row without hurting something. And they're the similar types of injuries, lower leg injuries. And so I don't want to say that I'm panicking about it, but I think you do start to think, if you're Brad Stevens, if you're Joe Mazzulla, that you want to have some contingency plan in place that's more than just assuming that Porzingis is going to be healthy in the playoffs, because we've just seen now, since last year's regular season, he hasn't been able to be healthy for extended stretches. He came back in the playoffs, got hurt within 2 games, hurt his calf. comes back in the finals, 2 games later gets hurt again, misses the first, 20 or 15 or so games of this regular season, and then since then he's been kind of on and off. So it stands out to me as is the biggest question about this team right now. If there is a question, it's that. And then you have enough to kind of compensate for it. You had it last year in the playoffs, and I felt like part of it was the run that they had. They didn't have to go up against guys like Giannis and Embiid. Not that Porzingis is your answer for those guys, but it helps to have more size. And then the other part of it is just the fact that from an injury standpoint, like they were otherwise really healthy. So it was just him. And so they were able to compensate for that. And you can't be certain that that's going to happen again too. So I think that's the thing that stands out. Obviously off the bench, you're not getting a whole lot right now. Pritchard really struggled in this one. He was 0 of 8 from 3. Hauser is just not getting off looks. It's kind of been the most frustrating thing to watch because you're talking about a guy who's one of the best 3-point shooters in the league. I mean, he took 0 shots in the loss versus Orlando and took 1 shot in this game. And I think part of that is his mobility and his back. He's playing more limited minutes. He played just 13 minutes tonight. Defensively, he's being exploited a little bit more. So that's part of what's keeping him off the floor. But also, I've said this a million times, but I think that whether or not Hauser is getting good looks is a great sign of how the Celtics offense is looking, whether it's a healthy offense, whether the ball is flying, whether the guys are moving or not.
There's nothing I love more than going to watch Celtics games, NBA games, and just going to events in general, and I always use Game Time for all of my ticketing needs. Game Time has a new feature called Game Time Picks that makes getting tickets for live events even easier. Game Time Picks filters out all the fluff to show you only incredible deals on great seats, so you don't have to waste time searching through thousands of tickets. So right now I'm looking for the Game Time app. I see that there is a Christmas Day game against the 76ers, and I can click on that and I can actually see not just what the seat options are, but what the view of the court will be, because Game Time offers seat views, where you get a panoramic view from your seat in the app before you buy. There's also a lowest price guarantee, where Game Time will credit you 110% of the difference, and there is all-in pricing, so you can actually see the total upfront price, no surprise fees at checkout. So I'm looking right now. Usually my holiday gifts are tickets to different sporting events that I know my friends and family will be interested in, and I always use Game Time for all of those purchases. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code CLNS for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code CLNS for $20 off. Download Game Time today. What time is it? Game Time.
So I'm going to close shortly here because we did do a post-game show on CLNS Media. You can find full breakdown of this game. Also, you can find all the press conferences on CLNS. So if you want to hear what Tatum, Al Horford, Joel Embiid had to say, all of that's on there. The last thing I will say, though, is that defending a championship is really hard. And I think there's a reason why nobody's won consecutive championships since the 2017 Warriors. And so it was never going to be just a smooth ride of domination without any issues. It was always going to be challenging. And I think that right now we're seeing there's a fork in the road, and there's an opportunity for them to respond to that adversity with a string of wins and just much more desperation and connectivity defensively. Or you can see what happened to defending champions in this league, and that's you don't get back to the same place you were last year. We haven't seen anybody even make the conference finals in years now. So the norm in this league has become to win a championship and to come back the next season and not be the same. And I still think that this team has all the pieces and all the, from the coaching staff to the star players to the depth at their best to defend that title. But I think that nobody should be kind of overly rattled at the fact that it's not a cakewalk, because it's just never meant to be a cakewalk. And so we'll see if there's any updates on Porzingis. We'll have updates on Friday from shoot around. We'll have updates from the game on Friday as well, so you can continue kind of following along coverage. You can find me on Twitter, Noa Dalzell, and on CLNS Media. We'll have all the press conferences from today's game. But I just wanted to close with that reminder, because ultimately that's the reality of how these things go. And I think if you watch Tatum's post-game press conference, he reiterated this point many, many times, that they don't have any they don't have any shake in their confidence right now. They know they can respond, but they're also not going to pretend like there aren't issues. There are defensive things that they need to work through, and they've came against a 76ers team that I picked them as the number one challenge to the Celtics in the East heading into the season, and now it hasn't looked like the best pick, but this game, I felt a little bit of indication, at least, that I get what I was thinking, because when Tyrese Maxey's playing at the level that he was playing, Joel Embiid, I think, has another gear that he's going to get to, and then you've got role players that are at their best or Celtics killers, like Caleb Martin. He's one of the scariest guys that can walk into this building, unfortunately. So there's pieces there that I think can make this team formidable, and part of it is just that you saw that, and ultimately you lost by 4 points. So they hung in there, and I like the fight down the stretch. Maybe it woke them up a little bit, and maybe that's something that they can carry forward to future games. So thanks for watching. Thanks for following along. I'll continue to have post-game reaction pods along with our post-game show. Thanks, everyone. Enjoy your rest of your Christmas.